Are going to continue a series that we started last week. Does anybody remember they gave it away. I was going to say, does anybody remember the name of the series? We're going through a series called Influencers, all right? And in this series, we are trying to answer the question. First thing we're trying to do is answer this question. What is it that influences us? Everybody say that with me. What is it that influences us, all right? So what we're doing, we're looking at this idea of influence. I share with you that this is something that I'm really passionate about. I like how it's kind of drizzled all throughout what I do here at the church, a little bit here, a little bit there. It all has to do with this idea of influence. We're looking at, how am I being influenced? How has God called me to be a person of influence, to be a person who compels and convinces people of truth, who is an agent of change in their community. So we're looking at this idea of influence. We're looking at part 2 tonight, and we're still trying to wrap our head around this question, all right? Part 1 and part 2 is all about this question. What is it that is influencing us? Hopefully, after part 1, you got a little bit better idea of maybe what it is that influences you. Remember, we talked about the idea of someone who is under the influence of alcohol. Remember, we talked about a DUI. Have you guys ever seen somebody who is drunk? When we see somebody who's drunk, it's easy to look at that person and to say, hey, that person is under the influence of alcohol. But whenever we sin, whenever we do something wrong, whenever we make a really dumb decision, whenever we act out in rage, whenever we're really mad, all those things, whenever we do things, it's harder for us to look at our own life or to look at the people around us and say, man, that person is under the influence of blank. It's harder for us to do that. And so we're trying to wrap our head around this question. Remember, the reason we're wrapping our head around this question, what is it that influences me, is because before we can figure out how God has called us and wired us and gifted us in influence to other people, we have to first figure out what is influencing me. So once we figure that out, once we nail that down, once we craft that, once we aim that towards Christ, then we can look at the second half, which is going to be part 3 and 4, about how has God called me to be an influencer. We're looking at it through a few different lenses. Last week, we talked about Abram and Lot. Tonight, we're going to look at the idea of influence through the lens of a guy named Judas. Everybody say Judas. Judas. Does anybody remember who Judas was, Kevin? Yeah, he was one of the 12 disciples, and he ultimately ended up betraying Jesus. Everybody say, boo, Judas. Yeah, betrayal, all right. That's who we're going to look at tonight. Now, Judas, he was one of Jesus' disciples. He lived with Jesus. At some point tonight, I promise you, I'm going to mix up Jesus and Judas. I promise I'm not a heretic. It's really hard to say those two names back to back to back, all right? So he lived with Jesus. He was with Jesus during his ministry, and he saw Jesus do all kinds of really cool stuff. Jesus is often called, in the New Testament, he's called rabbi or teacher or influencer, right? That is what Jesus was for his disciples. He constantly influenced them and trained them up to go out and to change the world. That's what the disciples were. And Judas was one of those. Now, Kevin gave us a spoiler. He said that Judas ended up betraying Jesus. And I want us to look to see how Judas got to that point. When you think of Jesus and how Jesus was on earth and he did stuff, what kind of things do you think about? Jesus and his ministry, what kind of things do you think? What kind of stories do you think about? No, hey, hold on first. No spoilers, right? You spoil. All right. Yeah. Feeding the 5,000, Kenyatta? Water into wine, that was his first miracle. What else? The parables. Yeah, he liked to tell stories. What else do you think about when you think of Jesus? I need a few more. Come on, give me some more. I need something to work with here. The woman at the well. Yeah, he had lots of conversations with people. What else? Yeah, in the back. Caleb. Did he steal yours? It's okay. All right. Well, who else? I need like two more. Give me 2 more. What do you think about Jesus? Raising Lazarus from the dead. Give me one more. I need somebody new. Leona. Walking on water. All right, so we talked about miracles. We talked about conversations that he had, encounters that he had with people, how Jesus would teach through parables. A couple weeks ago, we celebrated Jesus because of what? It was on Easter. We celebrate Jesus because of what? death and resurrection, right? We think about all these things about Jesus. When we think about those things, we think that they are good things, that they are amazing things. We love to talk about Jesus and the stories about Jesus. We love to learn about him. But not everybody liked Jesus the way that we like Jesus. And Judas, in the midst of seeing Jesus have these conversations with the woman at the well, walking on water, seeing Jesus feed the 5,000, Judas was right there with him, was in the midst of Jesus. And he was also with Jesus when this next scenario happened where we find out some people did not like what Jesus was doing. Jesus was in Jerusalem. He was kind of teaching at the temple, and we see this come out. Matthew chapter 26, it says, when Jesus had finished all these sayings, I think it'll come up there, he said to his disciples, you know that after 2 days the Passover is coming, and the Son of Man will be delivered up to be crucified. Then the chief priests and the elders of the people gathered in the palace of the high priest, whose name was Caiaphas, and plotted together in order to arrest Jesus by stealth and kill him, all right? So Jesus is there, he's teaching. He just taught a long period of teaching to people. And it says after he had finished all these sayings, he said to his disciples, he's right here, he's trying to teach them, he's trying to influence them. He was always trying to show them something. He said, hey, in a couple days, the Son of Man, which is what Jesus often called himself, will be delivered up to be crucified. And in the time that's happening, we hear about these religious leaders who are trying to figure out how can we arrest Jesus stealthily. What does stealthily mean? What does it mean? You guys have raised your hand too much. Give me somebody else. Yeah, blue. Like a ninja. Yeah, they were like, we're in secrecy. We don't want to like anybody else to know because Jesus was causing a little bit of disruption. He was causing the religious system. There's like a floating hair right here. That's really cool. He was causing the religious system to kind of be flipped upside down. And the religious leaders didn't like that. And so they say, you know what, we're going to get rid of this Jesus guy because he makes us nervous. They even criticize him of blasphemy. And that is what they were trying to do. And while the plot is thickening, because we know we just celebrated Easter, Jesus died, he resurrected. But before that, and in the midst of this plot thickening of how do we kill Jesus, Jesus continues doing his thing. He continues doing ministry. Look at what it says in the very next verse. It says, now when Jesus was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, a woman came up to him with an alabaster flask of very expensive ointment, like perfume. And she poured it on his head as he reclined at table. And when the disciples saw it, they were indignant. What does indignant mean? Kevin, come on, Kevin. Yeah, they were like mad. They were angry at what Jesus was doing or what this lady was doing. They said, why this waste? For this could have been sold for a large sum and given to the poor. But Jesus, aware of this, said to them, why do you trouble the woman? For she had done a beautiful thing to me. For you will always have the poor with you, but you will not always have what? Me. Jesus is still trying to teach them, trying to influence them, trying to show them that soon Jesus will not be with them. And that this idea, this thing that this woman has done was a good thing despite the amount of money that they might have seen being what they were calling wasted. It was actually in that time when people were buried, they would often put really good smelling stuff all over them. And so that as their body would rot in death, they wouldn't smell bad right away, that it would take some time. And so Jesus here is kind of like, hey, she's putting all this beautiful smelling stuff on me. You're not always going to have me. And the disciples, I think, maybe are still a little bit confused as to exactly what Jesus is going to go through in the next few days. All right. Oftentimes when we see something in the Gospels, there's 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, we often have the same story recorded in another Gospel. Because at this point, Judas hasn't really come up yet. But when we look at the book of John, we see something about Judas in this particular story. Let's look at John chapter 12, verses 4 and 6. But Judas Iscariot, one of his disciples who was about to betray him, this is the same story recorded from a different perspective, said, why was this ointment not sold for 300 denarii and given to the poor? A denarii is like a day's wages. How much do you think is a year's worth of wages? What does a good working man make in a year? Yeah. $89,000. I am in the wrong profession, all right? All right, so that's like 89 grand that this lady, this ointment, like 300 days of wages if you get 60 vacation days a year, once a week. He said this, not because he cared about the poor, but because Judas was a what? A thief, and having charge of the money bag, he used to help himself to what was put in it. See, Judas was mad because Judas was more interested in how much money had just been wasted and how much money he could have gained instead of being interested in what Jesus was trying to teach him. Do you see that? Judas was mad because he felt like Jesus had just wasted money that he could have gotten. He let money influence him more than he let Jesus influence him. Now, it's easy for us to look at Judas and to point fingers at Judas. Judas, you scumbag, why would you betray Jesus? Why would you steal money from Jesus' ministry? Why would you do this? Why would you let money influence you more than Jesus? And yet we do the same thing all the time. We might not be money, but there are oftentimes things in our life that influence us more than Jesus does. Would anybody agree with me on that? All right, half of you agree with me and half of you are liars, okay? So there are things in our life that influence us more than Jesus does. And we allow that, and that we're in the same problem that Judas is in. If you want to know, you want to narrow down quickly at what it is that influences you more than Jesus, think about how much time in a day you spend with God, and think about how much time in a day you spend on something else. On social media, at your sports practice, watching TV, watching TikTok, making TikTok, or what? I can't dance. I don't know how you say that, all right? Yeah, think about the amount of time, the proportions of time. What are we allowing to influence us more? TikTok or Jesus? Our sports team or Jesus? TikTok. Whoa, yeah, all right. We're in the same spot as Judas. We can take money out of the scenario and throw in whatever it is that influences us more. Let's take a look at how the influence of money, what that influence of money had on Judas. Later on in Matthew 26, we skip a few verses. It says, then one of the 12, whose name was Judas Iscariot, went to the chief priests and said, what will you give me if I deliver him over to you? Judas was mad. And they paid him 30 pieces of silver. And from that moment, he sought out an opportunity to betray him. So some time goes on. Jesus is at this Garden of Gethsemane. He's praying with the disciples. The disciples are all falling asleep. Jesus is like, disciples, wake up. The time is right now. And as soon as he says that, it goes to the next verse. It says that while he was still speaking, Judas came, one of the 12, and with him a great crowd of swords and clubs from the chief priests and the elders of the people. Now the betrayer, Judas, had given them a sign saying, the one I will kiss is the man. Seize him. And he came up to Jesus at once and said, greetings, Rabbi, teacher, influencer. And he kissed him. And Jesus said to him, friend, do what you came to do. Then they came up and laid hands on Jesus and seized him. Here's the point. Judas was under the teaching and the influence of Jesus himself, God, the Creator. And he didn't allow it to change his life. He was right there. He was right there under good influence. He could have totally jumped on with the 11, but he didn't. He didn't allow it to change his life. Now, obviously, there was prophecy that had to be fulfilled. Jesus prophesied that this would happen. The Old Testament said that this is the way it would go. But ultimately, Judas was there under the teaching and the influence of Jesus, and he was like, no, I'm not going to let that change my life. I would rather have money be the most important thing in my life than Jesus. I would rather be influenced by that more than I would rather be influenced by Jesus. When I was in college, I began feeling led to go into ministry. I don't know if you guys know this. This is like what I do for a living. Like on Mondays, I get up, and like when your parents go to work and you go to school, I like drive my old car over here and I go sit in my office and I try and figure out what the heck we're going to do this week, all right? And when I was in college, I was actually in college to be an accountant. Are any of your parents accountants? Yeah, I think I would have been a really bad accountant. I'm just being honest with you. but I was in school to be an accountant, and I met this guy one summer evening, and his name was Sean. Everybody say, hey, Sean. There's a picture of him and his family up on the screen. Yeah, this is Sean. Hey, Sean. He can't hear you, but thank you for saying hey to him. And Sean asked me if I would come and work for him. And Sean was a youth pastor, and he needed some help on Wednesday nights in his youth ministry, similar to what like Aaron is doing right now. Sean came to me and said, hey, Alan, can you come help me out on Wednesday nights? And I was like, well, I don't know, maybe. And he was like, no, it pays. I'll pay you money to come work. And I was like 19, and I was like, heck yeah, I need some money, whatever. And so I started working for Sean. And I worked for Sean for about a year. Sean gave me opportunities to like lead events and to do kind of outreach things and to come up with games. I helped him lead worship. And Sean taught me a ton of stuff. He constantly invested in me. Every Tuesday, he would take me to Sonic. And have you guys ever been to Sonic? Yeah, there's a Sonic in Streetsboro. He would take me to Sonic, and he would always buy me whatever drink that I wanted from Sonic. Sean always was teaching me. He was pouring into me, even in things that I didn't understand why he would say that or do that. He was always trying to teach me, just as Jesus did to Judas. Sean taught me a lot of stuff. A couple of things that Sean really taught me was the importance of ministry, like how important what we do here on a Wednesday night is. Like, you might think that this is just games, but I care about each and every one of you in this room. Our volunteers in this room, they care about you. And it's important. We feel like this is meaningful and it's what God has called us to. Sean also taught me a lot about what it means to do ministry, but he also crafted these gifts within me. He crafted things in me. He said, Alan, you're really good at that. I want to craft it. I want to make it better. He said, Alan, you're really bad at that, and that's a problem. We got to fix that one, all right? Sean was always crafting in me. Now listen, I'm telling you this because when I was working for Sean and spending a lot of time with Sean and he was investing in me, I could have looked at Sean and said, no thanks. Hey man, I appreciate it. I kind of am just doing this for the money. So like, thanks for the job, but I don't really want to know anything about like the wisdom you might offer me or the advice that you might give me. I'm kind of like, yeah, I like doing the games and like doing the music and stuff, but yeah, no thanks. I could have done that. And in that midst, I would have missed out on the opportunity to learn from Sean, to let Sean influence me. Now listen, is Sean God? No, he is not God. Absolutely not. But God can use Sean and people like Sean to influence us, to teach us good things, to push us towards holiness, to help us be more like Christ. And I think that there are things in life that can do that as well. There are all kinds of things in life that are bad influences, and some of these things that I'm going to list out in a second, you might think, yeah, those are really bad things. But I think that they can also be a good influence in our life, that they can push us to be more like Christ. They can push us towards holiness. So listen, I got 5 things, and if you're writing this out on your card, there's 5 things. The first redemptive influence is what I'm calling them. It is social media. Now you're like, Alan, you literally ripped us last week on how social media is so bad for us, and you just made fun of my TikTok dances. All right? But social media doesn't have to be a bad influence on you. It can be a positive one. Share with me for a second. I was scrolling through, I don't do TikTok. I'm sorry, okay? I wish that I could dance, but I'm really bad at dancing. You guys do not want to see me on TikTok. But I am on Instagram, and I was scrolling through Reels the other day, and I came across this church. I have no idea the pastor's name. I'd never even heard of his church. It's called Long Hollow. It's probably in like Texas because the name of the church is called Long Hollow, and I don't know, it sounds like a Texas church. And he said something. All right, I'm just scrolling through Instagram, and he said something. It really inspired me to think more about this series. He said, when I sin, I don't worry about what God will do to me. I worry about what God will not do through me. All right? This is just a random instance that I'm sitting at my home scrolling through Volkswagen videos on Instagram, okay? And this big hairy man shows up and he says this, and I was like, man, that is really big. That is really good. And in that moment, social media, despite the random Volkswagen videos I'm watching, had a positive influence on my life. And there are people that you can follow on social media so that your feed is not full of garbage, not full of ridiculously stupid memes, all right? I mean, you can have a couple good memes, okay? But it's not terrible, but it's actually full of encouragement. It's full of inspiration. It's full of things that will push you to be more like Jesus. Let's look at the next one. What about movies or TV, all right? How many of you guys are like a huge movie buff, all right? I hate movies. I'm sorry. I just don't like movies. But this guy in the back is a big movie fan, all right? What about Netflix or Hulu or Disney Plus or ESPN Plus? Or all right, I want on 3. I want you to shout out your favorite series. Think about it real quick. Favorite series. 3, 2, 1. Yeah, that's my favorite series too. All right. Yeah, we watch a ton of TV. All right. We watch a ton of TV. We watch a lot of movies. How often is it that movies and this Netflix series or the Hulu series that we're watching is a bad influence on us? It tempts us to sin. It tempts us to think about things that we should not be thinking about. It causes us to fall into sin. But it doesn't have to be that way. We don't have to watch garbage online. We just don't have to. You can actually watch good movies. You can watch movies with a critical eye, thinking about, man, what might God be trying to show me through this character? How does this character or this movie display a characteristic of God? You can actually watch movies through that lens. I don't, because I hate movies, but this guy back here talks a lot about it, all right? The Netflix series or the Hulu series or the Disney Plus series you're watching, I know how it is. There's a series and it looks kind of cool, and then you watch it and like halfway through episode 1, there's a scene you're like, bro, my mom, if she caught me watching this, oh my God, I would be on restriction for like 6 months, all right? Yeah, you can go to a different series. You don't have to keep watching it. You can go to the next one, all right? It doesn't have to be a negative influence on our life. I'm not telling you to give up movies and TVs. I'm telling you to be careful, put up guardrails about what you watch online. What about your friends? How many of you, don't raise your hand because your friend might be in this room. That'd be kind of weird, all right? He raised his hand, all right? He raised his hand too. All right. How many of you say you have a lot of friends or at least a friend who is a bad influence on you? Don't raise your hand. Put your hand down, all right? How many of you are that friend? No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, our friends can be a bad influence on us. Listen. Our friends don't have to be a bad influence on us. Did you know? Can I let you guys in on a little secret? Yeah, you can actually go to a couple of your friends and say, hey, could we meet up and like study the Bible together? Oh my gosh. Did you know that you could actually, like if you have a friend who's a Christian and there's like something that you struggle with, you could actually like go to that friend and say, hey, I am really mean to my parents. That's probably the least of your worries as a sin struggle, but I'm really mean to my parents. Could you like check in on me to make sure I'm not really mean to my parents anymore, that I actually treat my parents with respect? And somebody can hold you accountable. Your friends don't have to be a negative influence on your life, but oftentimes we let them be. We aren't the one initiating some sort of, man, how can these friendships push me to be more like Christ, push me towards holiness? What about your sports teams, all right? Yeah, oh man, I just stepped on the sports team. This guy's got a broken arm, he can't play no sports, all right? Yeah, what about your sports teams? Think about how much time and energy of your mind you spend on whatever spring sport you're in or conditioning for whatever fall sport you're going to be in. Listen, sports can be really good for you. Sports can teach you discipline. Sports can teach you teamwork. Sports can teach you a commitment. But listen, sports can also consume your life. It wasn't but a few weeks ago I sat down with a student who said, you know what, this is like way too, it's not that I don't like sports, I actually love sports, but my relationship with God is so far behind me right now because all I can think about is track. Your sports team doesn't have to be a negative influence on you, but when you let it consume your mind, when it's like the thing that you stay up late night thinking about, how you can like perfect whatever aspect of your sport it is, or whenever you care more about your track meet than you do than your quiet time, like sports can be really bad influence on you, but they don't have to be. They can actually be really good for you and teach you good things, but don't let them consume you. I got one more for you. What about your music, all right? The things that you listen to. I got a quick question. Does anybody here listen to podcasts? Oh my gosh, I am really surprised right now. All right, the music you listen to. How many of you would just go out on a limb and say, I listen to some music that is straight up trash, all right? It does nothing but talk about things that I should not be talking about, makes me think about things that I should not be thinking about, and the only reason I listen to it is because all of my friends are listening to it, all right? Hey, guess what? Guess what? Can I let you in on another little secret? Your music can actually be a really positive influence on your life. Your Spotify playlist can be full of good music. I have a band that I'm listening to right now called Maverick City Music, and I love it. I literally will play it in my office. They have songs that are like 16 minutes, so I rarely get through more than one song. But I just play it over and over. I walk into my office like every Monday morning and say, hey, Google, can you play Maverick City Music? And she'll say, playing Maverick City Music on Spotify. That's not how she talks, but whatever. All right? That's pretty accurate. Oh, nice. I am Siri now. All right? Listen, the things you listen to can be good for you. They don't have to be a negative influence. Last week, I spent the whole time talking about how social media and the things we watch and the people we hang out with, our community, the things that we listen to. I talked about how they're all really bad influences on your life. But listen, I'm not calling you to go and put noise-canceling headphones on and sit in your mom's basement for the rest of your life. I realize that more than likely, every single one of us is going to have social media and going to watch things on TV. We're going to have friends. We're going to be on some sports team or club or group, and we're going to listen to music. What I want you to figure out is that these things can be good influences in our life. Ultimately, and this is where Judas went wrong, the primary influence in our life, the number one influencer, cannot be any of these things. It has to be God. When God is the number one thing that influences us in life, that is when we know that God is moving us into the realm of being an influencer. Now listen, some music, just like Sean influenced me, Sean's not God. There are some kinds of music that you listen to, some podcasts that you can listen to that will influence you positively towards Christ. There are some things that you can do on your sports team that will influence you towards Christ. Some of your friends, some things you watch, some things that you see on social media. All together, those things can work so that they influence you towards Christ. And that is my goal for you. That ultimately, when you look at your life, you would say, you know what? When I do this, when I act out in this way, the thing that's influencing me is not social media, is not my friends, is not peer pressure, is not any of those things. The thing that's influencing me is God. And when that happens, the things that you do will not be dumb decisions and sin and mistake. They will be good things. You'll be like, I don't know, you'll see somebody in the hallway and you'll say, you know what, that person looks really sad. I'm going to skip whatever I was about to do and I'm going to go see what I can do to help them, what I can do to pray for them. Like God will influence you in that way, all right? All right, listen, I want you to talk about some of these things together. And so I want you guys to break up into some small groups. And I want you to group up in about 7 or 8 people in a circle. Let's keep it 8 or less. No more than 8 people in your circle. And I want you to work through these questions together. I'm going to give you 10 whole minutes to work through those questions. All right. Hey, hopefully you had some time in your groups to kind of process some of those things. Hopefully you did. Hey, just to reiterate a couple things. We are working through this idea of influence, all right? We want to know, what is it that influences me? Why is it I do the things that I do? Ultimately, we're trying to figure this out so that we can figure out what is it that influences me, and now how can I use that influence to go out and influence the world for Christ, all right? The ultimate goal is to let God be our primary influencer. That's my hope. That's my prayer for you, that in all things in life, no matter what you come in contact with, you find a way to allow God to influence you through those avenues. Ultimately, the main way He does that is through reading your Bible, through praying to Him, all right? But He can use social media and our friends and music and TV and all of that stuff. as well. Hey, if you do listen to podcasts, there will be a special episode on our Redemption Youth podcast coming out tomorrow about specific things like pages to follow, influencers to follow on social media, podcasts to listen to, how to pick the right Netflix series, all of that good stuff. You can find the link in our Instagram bio, but it has everything to do with tonight, just a little bit more, all right? Hey, let me go ahead and pray for you guys. Lord, we do thank you for showing us in the life of Jesus what it means to influence people, to teach them. Lord, help us to be influenced and be taught by you. Help us to use things and tools in life to do that, but ultimately help us to be seeking you in all things that we do. Lord, help us to do that this week. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.